Definitely some interesting things on the political landscape. Everything from Tulsi Gabbard, I should say, and RFK Jr. being named to the Trump transition team, to the whole notion of definitely, I think, 1 million or so voters being removed from the rolls over there in Texas. And they included everything from people having moved to some folks that were no longer here, they were deceased, to a number of other reasons that folks were taken off of the roll and everything. But that's definitely a lot of people, about 1 million people that are off the rolls in that way. And of course, there was something else interesting that I saw as well, and I'm going to share this with you and see if any of our panelists come and join us in the conversation. But I did find this interesting article from a former North Carolina governor. And he said he's not optimistic about Harris or Trump, that being a former North Carolina governor, Jim Martin. So this was released earlier today in the Charlotte Observer. And I'm just going to read the notion of what he said. And if y'all have interesting comments, or if you agree with it, or think that he is on the right path, let me know y'all's thoughts in that regards. But he said that there is, from a 30-year career in Republican politics, precinct chairman, county commissioner, congressman, governor, my strong disappointment with both 2024 conventions was they ignored moderate, non-affiliated voters as if they didn't exist. He said, I'm not exactly moderate, but I'm getting there fast without having to change my views. And then he goes on to say, Republicans put on a rousing convention for their MAGA base, period. Nominate Donald Trump, scorned moderates by choosing J.D. Vance of Ohio as his running mate. Isolationist bluster reassured MAGA. Personal faith was stroked. Less so was any restrictive code on abortion, but that's working against Republicans at this time. Going forward, Trump's advantage on border policy will be swamped by floods of TV ads blasting him for sabotaging the Senate immigration compromise. As for the Democratic National Convention, it was good to see enthusiastic Democrats rediscover faith, family, freedom, and flag, but that awakening didn't extend to fiscal fundamentals. Instead, they cheered full-heartedly price controls on food and numerous generous gratuities, free down payments for first-time homeowners, free health care for all, college loan forgiveness, subsidized electric cars, and other unaffordable fantasies. So this is a letter that former Governor Jim Martin wrote earlier today and everything. And he said, so why don't I support Trump? Because I cannot disregard his infamous role inside an insurrection on January 6, 2021. The most damaging testimony to the Congressional Investigating Committee came not from Democrats, but from his own White House staff of diehard Republicans. Closing the border won't erase Trump's heresy. Then why don't I support Vice President Kamala Harris? At first, her campaign hinted she no longer championed Medicaid for all, defunding police, or banning fracking for all. After she sailed onto the nomination without a single delegate ever won any state president primary, such deception become unnecessary. Her campaign stopped pretending. I expect she too will move quickly to solve the contentious border issue, but adding an easy path to citizenship could be a bridge too far. And can she claim credit for President Joe Biden's successes without sharing blame for his immigration, inflation, and Afghanistan debacles? So then there's the enigma of her affable running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. His reputation, other than being a fine coach, is blurred by claims that he has misrepresented himself. If I seem less than optimistic, it's because I am. Republicans show little optimism after getting outsmarted by Biden's withdrawal from the 2024 race. Democrats' rhetoric promised an optimistic future, but is based on generous commitments that debt-strapped Americans cannot afford. Our 35 million trillion federal debt plus another trillion or two every year is a self-inflicted weakness. It limits how we can afford another pandemic, any serious effort to displace carbon fuels, or another terrorist assault. Another major crisis with limited ability to borrow will require monetizing the deficit with conjured cash and credit, causing steeper inflation. And then he goes on to say, and this is where I'm going to get to our guests or our regular panelists and everything. He said, with 7 weeks until early voting begins in North Carolina on October 7th, will either campaign truly commit to enough fiscal restraint to keep our sinking ship of state afloat? Maybe populist pandering will dissipate after the winner is inaugurated. It's a thin hope. Senate filibusters may not fit the Democratic ideal, but are among the few defenses left to protect Americans from the partisan excesses of the next administration, whoever wins. Constitutional separation of powers is another. He goes on to quote the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, who said, "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold." He added, "The best lack all convictions, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." And he asked us, does that sound familiar? And he says, "Whatever productive days I have left after the election will be offered to help organize a third party." Maybe he's been talking to David Walker, and everything from the 35% plurality of centrists, pragmatists, moderates, and problem solvers out there. It will be built up from the grassroots, not top down. Scoff if you like, but we just can't quit. Hoping the major parties will become less radical depends on non-affiliated voters swarming back to moderate the party they left. It won't happen. Neither party wants you. So that's what our former governor, Jim Martin, said. And all along those lines, so he put that in the Charlotte Observer earlier today. So I think we're going to see some more of this kind of attempts to get people maybe unaffiliated to think about forming a third party and maybe not be pleased with either candidate and all along those lines. But yeah, I just saw that article before we started this show and thought I would share it with others as well, because Jim Martin was maybe not as popular as Mr. Hunt, Jim Hunt, but he was as I recall, a relatively popular governor here in North Carolina. But he's basically saying that he doesn't like either of the candidates, Trump or Harris, and he feels that they are not appealing to the centrists and that neither of their plans are workable, as you can tell from part of what I read and everything. But what's your take on that, Rick? Oh, by the way, Rick, the other article that I read that was interesting, I'm not going to read that entire the article, was there was a notion that two primary people that are leaders in the Democratic Party were only in a ceremonial role in one case and in no role in another case at the Harris inauguration. So there was an article that I was reading that was saying that in the battle between Harris and Newsom, it looks like Harris has won because she's the nominee, and apparently Newsom said, both Newsom and Schiff said that they had school commitments, because I think they do have some kids in school environments and everything along those lines.
So Newsom is fairly young. He can, if Harris wins, he can run for president in 8 years. If Harris loses, he could run for president in 4 years. But there was no way that he could run for president this year without losing. So, but let's talk about Nick, who runs this network, Pod TV, is very, along with David M. Walker, very upset about our national debt. There was one other time when our national debt as percent of GDP matched the levels that it's at now, and that was World War II. We spent a ton of money to win the war, and then we ended up dominating the world for the next 50 years. So having that ratio, that huge debt, doesn't necessarily doom us. We're not going to solve the debt problem. Neither candidate, neither party is focused on that. What we can do, what I keep saying, is we can continue to be successful industrially, technologically, and that will mitigate the damage done by huge national debt. Sasha?
I'm actually puzzled when there is on this network so many discussions about national debt. I think most voters, they are completely indifferent to the national debt. They don't care about national debt, whether it's 35 trillions or 40 trillions or 30 trillions. What makes the difference in their lives? Absolutely nothing, not even a small little thing. So therefore, the national debt is for pundits, is for people who trying to bring attention to this problem. Okay, they succeed. They bring attention for 5 minutes, maximum 10. That's about it. There's nothing to do about it.
Yeah, but Sasha, what do you say? Because one of the arguments I hear from the Republican side, but I also hear it from the Democrats to some degree, is this notion of pocketbook politics and everything. Because I actually was watching another YouTube video, I think it was. It was a restaurateur that was saying that before the Biden administration, he was getting something like $40 a egg for $40 for eggs or something like that, and now it's $100 for eggs and everything. So definitely, it seems like that would be a pocketbook issue that folks may be paying attention to. So definitely, what is your take on that? Because that does seem to be something that a lot of people are worried about, whether it's the price of gas, whether it's the price of eggs, whether it's the price of whatever.
Republicans are sorry. Go ahead.
What is the connection between for the price of eggs or bread or just anything to national debt? Where is the connection? How you do the same thing that I love watch soccer, and at the same time I'm worried about national debt. So what's the connection between the game of soccer and the national debt of the United States? Anybody here, please explain.
Well, Nick, if you'll explain it to me or explain it to him and everything.
No, there isn't any. There isn't any. But let me tell you what's going on here in Washington, great old Washington, D.C. There's not a dollar that they can't figure out how to spend in Washington, D.C. And they spend it on all sorts of junk. In other words, they talk about our industry, the Department of Labor, about our, quote, junk fees. And junk fees are commissions that our producers earn because they work their butts off. What's really going on, there's a junk government. And what it is, it's overpaid bureaucrats that sit in Washington, D.C. that torment the rest of us. And they do it indiscriminately because they have all that power. And what we need to do, and when the Republicans do go in, which is part of Project 2025, is to start haircutting them, firing them, and getting rid of them because they're worthless pieces of junk that sit there and all they do is increase our national debt, making our children and our grandchildren poorer so that government becomes richer. So what we're going to see is a reversal in that, and that's the reason Trump's going to get elected, because the Democrats are destroying the economy.
Do you remember a song by ABBA, The Winner Takes It All? So here's the case. The winner takes it all. You know why they're making the national debt and they're overpaying their bureaucrats and everything else? Because they are the winners. Win the election and go ahead with Project 2025 and 26 and 27 and anything what you want. Win it, baby. Then you make the rules.
All right,
Sorry, my friend.
I take about 50 vitamins a day, and most of them don't do anything. But I don't know which third of the vitamins do something. We don't have the science yet. All we have are wild guesses. And it's kind of the same with government spending on stuff. We had 2 junk programs in the 60s that were ridiculous. We had the Vietnam War, which led nowhere. We lost after being there for 15 years. And we had NASA's program to go to the moon. We made it to the moon. We haven't been back in 50 years. And ridiculous, all this money spent. However, the technology that came out of the war and that came out of NASA have made us technologically dominant for the past 50 years. So we don't know which part of spending is junk and which part will actually be effective. Now, one thing we can do is to have reasonable people using like modern technology to figure out how to make government more efficient. I don't trust Trump and his team of idiots to do that. Neither do I trust the Democrats to have that as a program, to cut government. So, I mean, we're stuck with it, but that doesn't mean that the country is going the way of the Roman Empire.
Hey, Nick, just really quickly, along those same lines and everything, there is a program, because I know some people that are helping to administer it, and they've given some to businesses. Now they're giving some to arts and cultural organizations, and this is a national program and everything. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're thinking that programs like the American Rescue Plan don't need to be enacted and everything, because part of what they're supposed to be doing is giving money to help businesses get off their be on solid ground and everything along those lines. And now there is a component of that is supposed to be helping cultural institutions and cultural businesses as well. So you're saying that ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan, doesn't need to be an actual plan?
Well, you're muted. You're muted.
You're on mute, Nick.
Thank you. It was not an American Rescue Plan. This was just more excuse for government spending. It's like the Inflation Reduction Act. There was no Inflation Reduction Act. More government spending. And the reason why you're having inflation has nothing to do with the Fed. It has nothing to do with corporations getting more profits. It has to do with one item: government spending. They're flooding. And they did it on purpose. Obama and his friend Biden did it years ago on purpose to restart the economy. When they did it then, that was the correct maneuver, oddly enough, because our M1 had shrunk so much because of the Bush administration tightening the belt that they needed to put money in the economy. But now the economy being overflooded with money creates this thing called inflation. And the first thing the Democrats do, because they're not objective, they're not honest, they start blaming corporations rather than saying, you know what, we overspent our budget like $2 trillion. We need to pull it in so inflation goes down rather than having to rely on the Federal Reserve, which they did, who increased interest rates to slow it down because it's never their fault. So I agree with Rick. Unfortunately, our politicians, both parties, don't objectively look at how to solve this particular problem. They don't even look at the problem.
So, but the bill passed, I think, in November of 21. So it's been almost 3 years, and I've read that about 60,000 infrastructure projects are underway. Like if you drive in California, your car suffers about $1,000 worth of damage a year just from driving over our crappy, unrepaired roads. I assume it's similar to that across the whole country.
Yeah.
We do need some infrastructure.
Oh, I agree with you. The thing is, there are certain projects that need to be funded, such as the infrastructure project you're discussing. But there's no reason to subsidize, I hate to say it, my friend Sasha Starr, by flooding the chip manufacturers with money who are extremely profitable to begin with so they can make more profits. That is not a government function. And we need to be honest. That is not something our broke federal government can get involved in. They have to be very careful. And the other thing is with our military spending. Yeah, we have the biggest military in the world, but is that money being spent effectively? Probably not. And the thing is, we need to take a look at that. And so what happens is
we spend about $1 trillion a year on our military.
On our military.
That's 40% of all the world's spending on military.
Right.
But,
it wouldn't be a problem except every year this administration is generating a deficit, not a debt, a deficit of close to $2 trillion a year, which means real simple. They're spending $2 trillion.
You always talk about deficit. Now, what if there is a business partnership? Because a lot of these business partnerships are done in conjunction. So they're like private, public organizations, or sometimes even different municipalities that organize together and everything. For example, I've just used Durham as an example, but it's only partial example. It happens in California. It happens every place else is where, but just like everything else, there was a grind and halt during the COVID-19 to the cultural and art sector here, and revenue losses for the organizations over the 18 months exceeded something like $20.5 million. And they said it was going to take 2.5 years to recover. So what they did is they got some of this money, some of it is federal money, but they also have some local money that they have put together with it. And that's what the ARP funding is. And so it's actually, like I said, American Rescue Plan funding that the city and the county are receiving in addition to the other money to help some of these people that were hurt significantly by the pandemic to recover, and maybe recover in quicker than 2.5 years and everything. So if I'm hearing you correctly, even if it is a mixed organization, because the money that is raised is coming from both individuals, corporations, foundations, and yes, state funds and federal funds. So it's a mixed funding that is creating this. But if I'm hearing you correctly, that none of that money should be coming down the pike from the federals.
That is correct. It should not be coming from the federal mark. You're correct. It could come from the states. By the way, I checked all the debts in the states. The states, the war state, is better funded than the federal government. The federal government is way out of control. Okay, so if the money, Mark said, came from the states and the local municipal corporations, the answer is yes. Go ahead and spend it. Like in the state of North Carolina, they even have a rainy day fund. But the federal government, which is broke, completely broke, has no business giving money away in a period of time when basically they're so far broke, who knows when and if they'll ever become.
But hold on a second.
solvent.
But if I'm hearing you correctly, and I'm just making sure that we're all on the same page, and maybe Sasha will have some thoughts about this.
Yeah, no problem with the state.
Correctly, we should also be giving money to aid in some people that are dealing with terrorists across the board as well, because some of the money that you're talking about that we don't need to give is also being given to other countries, be that Ukraine, be that
That's right.
be that Singapore or Philippines, or be that some of the African nations. So if I'm hearing you correctly, we don't need to send money to the overseas people either.
That's right. Well, you know, the only way we'd send money overseas is we have to get something back in return, Mark. We're not a country that has a lot of money. If Ukraine wants money, no problem. They can go to China, or they go to the state of North Carolina, which has a lot of money, and ask them for money. But the federal government is broke. And the first thing your politicians need to recognize is that they're broke. And then let's go from there.
So around 2020, all the streaming services, Netflix, HBO Max, Disney, were spending their asses off on making entertainment, wanting to be the last man standing when the streaming wars ended. And then COVID happened, and we consumed all that entertainment, and it was great. COVID sucked, but what was on TV was freaking awesome. But nobody won the war. Nobody beat out everybody else. And now, after 4 years of the wild spending of tens of billions of bucks to entertain us, all the entertainment companies are like, F it. Nobody won, so now we're going to spend like half as much. We're not going to make anything. But the deal is that kind of competition and wild spending, I think, has parallels with everybody in all the big nations of the world, maybe some small ones, being in the starting blocks to grab the huge profits to be made when AI really kicks in. You don't want to be behind, and Sasha can talk about this, when AI starts delivering super new technology. And if we have to spend our asses off now to not be left behind, I don't know, that might be the right move. What do you think, Sasha?
I think that investors are now questioning the amount being spent on artificial intelligence, and they're questioning when and what returns there will be. And some of them are being scared that the spending is continuing, but the returns are not visible for next 5 years, maybe even more. On the other hand, the same companies who are spending the most money, which are Meta, Google, Microsoft, they are answering to that nobody can afford to stay behind. Whether it will pay in 3, 5, 7, or whatever years, it doesn't matter, because if you are behind, that's it. You will never catch in, and it will never pay you anything. So with profits from the other parts of their business, the profits are absolutely astronomical. They believe that they can afford to spend and spend and spend, and that's where we are. That's exactly what's tomorrow is NVIDIA's quarterly report, and it's actually a great guess. What's going to happen? It's after market at 4 o'clock tomorrow, and we will see whether NVIDIA is continuing to deliver the astronomical profits and sales and so on, or it's subsiding and it's not as great as a lot of people believe.
A similar thing happened with the internet in the late 90s. Everybody thought they were going to get rich and be a millionaire having a website.
.com, yeah.
The year 2000, everybody's like, well, the internet still kind of sucks. It's not living up to expectations. And there was a huge crash, and all these half-assed companies like pets.com went out of business. And then Google comes along in 2005, and then all of a sudden the internet is everything people wanted it to be 5 years before. And now the internet's freaking amazing, but we might and will likely get a similar AI crash because everybody has been hyped for AI for the last 3 years. It's not going to live up to expectations over the next few years. People are going to be like, but then after another 5 years, it's going to be back super powerful and start like kicking the world's ass.
It's very important to understand the companies, what I mentioned, who are spending incredible amounts of money on AI. I'm talking about Meta, Microsoft, Google, and a few others. They're not going to get broke like in the early days of internet, the bust of 2000. That's not going to happen with these companies because it represents really a very small portion of their overall financial stand and the percentages of their profit. So that's really nothing. And NVIDIA is the only one supplier that can provide the infrastructure required to build this artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So I would separate this few companies with the many other startups and so on, that they all depends on how much money they can raise, invest in AI, and wait until the next round of financing that may or may not materialize.
It all depends on management, Sasha. See, you're talking about a well-managed company. If you looked at Netflix, they were the fastest growing stock in the New York Stock Exchange last decade. This decade, obviously not. NVIDIA has taken that position. But who's going to be in the next decade? We don't know yet. But all the companies that have done well have been well managed financially, including Microsoft, that had to beat out a lot of competitors to go where they're at. Now, which ones don't survive? The ones that are not well managed financially. Now, what's the problem with our U.S. government? Our U.S. government would survive if it was managed financially well off. In other words, if it had good management. But we can see, based on the two-party system that we have right now, and the people that are candidates, that we do not get top leaders. We get who knows what that shows up, and we're not being managed properly, which is one reason the United States had 50% of the GDP, now have less than 25% of the world GDP. The reason the United States was in the top 25 in education now is not there. When we look at all the metrics, even in health, I was looking for the United States. Spain is number one, where I'm going to. United States didn't even crack the top 50 in health. So what we have in our government is extremely poor management. Where are the Harvard MBAs? Where are the University of Chicago MBAs? They're helping out Trump and Kamala. I don't see them. Instead, all I see is political hacks to the right, political hacks to the left. Have you ever spent time with people that got their MBAs from Stanford or Harvard? Sasha, these are really, really bright people, but you'll never see them in the federal government.
So when you look back on which presidents in recent history were good managers, maybe Eisenhower in the 50s.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
And then Clinton in the 90s, according to David Walker, because he
balanced the budget.
He reduced the deficit.
You're right. He balanced the budget. Clinton, whether people like him or not, I'm sorry, he was a great manager. He actually was the last president to balance the bloody budget, something that no candidate has done since then. And not only that, he kept a very strong economy for the 8 years there, and he was a good speaker. So Clinton was a killer.
And he was freaking lucky. The worst thing that happened to him was Monica Lewinsky. But hold on, and there's one more thing. America was fantastically lucky geographically in World War II because
that is correct.
So
isolated from European
wars. The
wars.
Northern Hemisphere was smoking ruins. We inherited the world, and we had half of all manufacturing in the world. And unless we get our government's act together, we're going to lose those advantages.
Well, I mean, part of what I saw your hand, Sasha, but part of what I'm going to bring up a topic that people don't always feel that pleased about. I know that you're not a big fan of it, Sasha, and everything, but one of the arguments that people make about crypto, and they make it about certain other things as well, is this notion of what I'm hearing a lot of you say. You are glad that Trump is doing, which is basically decentralizing things, because those people that don't want a centralized force, that is why those kind of programs became popular, and they're also the reason that even like Amway and other kind of programs that are far away different from crypto became popular as well, because a lot of people were feeling that this was a way to government to have less control over their lives and everything. So that's the argument that people make from Gen Z and the millennials and stuff as to why they support that, because they don't want a centralized bank and they don't want a centralized government, which apparently that's apparently what Trump is saying he's not a fan of either.
All right, one quick thing then, Sasha, but like most of the people who are into crypto don't even understand freaking crypto. I see their tweets, and most of them are like not smart enough to understand what they're doing.
Yeah, like I said, that's the argument of some people. I've got some friends that are studied almost as detailed as you study the banking market. One of my coworkers studies it regularly, and he is constantly studying just like you would a regular stock and everything. And he has made some money. He's also seen it go up and down. I think the last time it was on a downward spiral, but now it seems like the last time I asked him, it was on an upward spiral. But he does do a study of it. So I've seen people that literally study it just like you would any other type of stock or anything.
No, I don't understand the crypto. You cannot go even buy a coffee with your crypto. And if you want to withdraw money from crypto, it's a very tedious and cumbersome transaction, provided that you still have your keys to your account, provided that the money hasn't been stolen from your account, provided that your keys to your account hasn't been stolen. And the risk in crypto is still enormous. The use of crypto is still minuscule. You cannot really do. Can you buy ice cream with your crypto? Can you buy condominium with your crypto, or a car, or anything? Even Elon Musk at one point, he said that now you can pay for my cars with crypto, and it was there for a couple of months, and then he canceled that program. So you no longer can buy Tesla with your crypto. So the use of crypto, I really don't understand what's in it. It's now $52,000 one Bitcoin, right? And it was 70,000 just recently. So the whatever currency, or you want to call it, whatever it is, it's lost 30% in a few weeks. I don't know what kind of passage it is.
Like I said,
didn't you mention, Mark? Didn't you just mention Amway?
I was saying Amway is a parallel. I wasn't saying
Amway is just a slow-moving Ponzi scheme. Amway, making profits in Amway, depends on recruiting a pyramid of people below you to sell for you. A Ponzi scheme is the same thing as a pyramid scheme. Once there are so many people have been signed up for it in your community that you can't recruit new people to keep building up the pyramid, the whole thing collapses, and only a few early people leave without getting financially devastated.
And there's several of those that exist. There's that one that has to do with travel. There's the ones that have to do with real estate. So there are a number of those multi-level marketing plans. And I've heard some people compare crypto to that. I'm not saying because I don't have any money in crypto, but I have friends that are heavily invested in all of those lines. And some of them have found ways to cash out, because that's what they do, is they cash out sometimes, and then they make some money that way. And like I said, they can explain it better than I can, and who knows, maybe we'll get them on one of these shows one of these days, and they can tell you how they do it. I know I've had a couple of them on my own personal shows, and they have tried to explain it to me and all of those lines. I will agree with something you said, Sasha, because I did do one of those Meta wallets one time and everything, and yes, those codes can be next to impossible to remember and everything, and if you lose it, then you are totally at a loss because I was doing that with I think it's NFT, so I needed to use a Meta wallet in order to get an NFT, and I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I'm sure it's somewhere in this house, but I couldn't even tell you.
One guy
Very complicated.
famously threw away his hard drive, or his wife threw it away,
Right.
and he threw away $400 million. And he spent the next 10 years going through landfills trying to find the hard drive that had the key on it.
And that could be the same case with that art that I bought. For all I know, that art is worth tons of money because I've not had a chance to look at it because that meta key is lost and I don't know where it's lost to. So for all I know, it could be something to the worth of Picasso for all I know, but I doubt it because it was some pop art. I did have a quick question since we're on world politics that I was curious about. And I know your show is sometimes called Ukraine, Russia, and China, Sasha, but as I alluded to in the World Edition earlier today, and I think I alluded to it yesterday as well, it seems that China is flexing its muscles. So is this something that the world needs to be concerned about? Because I saw that they're doing stuff against Japan, they're doing stuff against the Philippines, which is literally in our backyard and everything. So how much, I know that a lot of people are concerned about the Middle East, and rightfully so. They're concerned about Ukraine, and rightfully so. But it does seem like the Asian market or the Asian theater is also in play as well. You are a military person. I did not serve in any army. You served in the Russian army and everything. So what is your take on the Chinese moves? Because it does seem like they are maneuvering more than they had been.
You see, after the Cold War, there were two superpowers for a while, US and Russia. Russia very soon, or the Soviet Union at the time, they collapsed and their economy went down the drain. And essentially, there was one superpower left. Now there is a strange situation. Russia rebuilt its military, but now it's bogged down in the Ukrainian war, and there's so much are being taken by that war, which they're not even winning this war so far. And Ukrainian now is on Russian territory, and there is no power that Russia has to expel them from there. US, while it's helping Ukraine, but only to a degree that Ukraine will not win. They're scared to have Ukraine win and Russia lose this war. So they're helping a little bit here and there. And
wait, can you explain that? Because I've seen that why the U.S. doesn't want Russia to lose. What's the deal there?
They are scared of Russia's nuclear arsenal, and they're scared that the people like Putin and whoever they're ruling the country with him, in case of obvious losing situation, they could retaliate with the nuclear missiles, and not tactical nuclear missiles, but actually all-out war. Because they could be in a situation when there's nothing to lose, and if we are losing the war, let's all world lose with that just as well. So let's everybody become loser. But so far, Russia is bogged down in that war. The U.S., because of this horrible misunderstanding, Russia will never use a nuclear arm simply because they understand that they will be the first one who will go down. The rest of the world, maybe not, maybe will, but not to such a degree. But as Russia, they will completely devastated and wiped out. So there is a void, and that void now China feels that it can feel, while China, at least officially, is uncommitted to Ukrainian-Russian war. So now they can call the shots almost unopposed, because U.S. is either they don't want to meddle in international politics at all and just continue to help a little bit to Ukraine just by inertia, and especially if Trump will come to power, obviously the United States will not. They will stop help to Ukraine. They will definitely have understanding with his friend Putin. Okay, you take a little bit here, a little bit there. Look, we are friends. Why are you going to fight for Ukraine. No, nobody needs that. So they will stop helping European countries at all, including NATO. So there will be a huge void with Trump coming to power, and that void, China, while Russia is devastated with the Ukrainian war, and the U.S. is completely unwilling to commit to their international politics anything at all, then China comes in front, and China may become a major power simply because of the void.
Will Ukraine go on the offensive in the next couple months to try to make some progress in pushing Russia out in case Trump gets elected and they lose support? Will they try to?
Aren't they already on the offensive, Sasha?
They are now very careful. Okay, they got, I think it's 1,000 square miles of Russian territory. They build fortifications. They're bringing engineering soldiers, and they are trying to have Russia to guess where their next attack will be. And there are several points where Ukrainian can, first of all, augment this territories that they already control, and they can start attacks, even whether it's Crimea or maybe some other points. So Russia, by the way, they continue their attacks against Ukrainian territory daily. They have all these weapons and drones and artillery and missiles. They're hurting Ukrainian infrastructure and killing Ukrainian people. Unfortunately, there are two theaters of the war now. It's like Second World War, if you remember. There was one Russian theater, there was then Italy, North Africa, then European and France, and so on.
So I assume, but you can tell me, I assume the Ukrainian troops that are occupying Russia are behaving themselves.
Yes, they behaving exemplary, if I could say so. Except if there is a resistance, and they have to overpower Russian army, but it happens so rarely, because the Russians, whenever the Ukrainian army is getting ahead, they immediately give up, and they're going into become prisoners of war, because they know that Ukrainians are treating prisoners really well, and so they, instead of being killed, their option is to become prisoners of war, and they're absolutely right in that. So far there are no excesses.
That's good to hear and everything. Hey, Rick, I had a quick question for you based on one of the other things that I mentioned at the beginning before you and Sasha joined and Nick joined earlier as well, but he had to go off to a meeting and everything. But there was a issue that involves Latin America, but it also involves just the voting rolls as well, because I did hear earlier today that George Abbott has purged like some 1 million votes off of Texas, and I hear that some of those votes are folks that are of Latin American descent. There are other folks that are long gone, they're dead, and other reasons that he has purged folks and everything. And I was just wondering, are you fearful that something like that could happen in California, even though Abbott's there in Texas?
No. I mean, but we have, California has, whatever you think of Democrats, California has much better governance than Texas. Ken Paxton, the Texas's attorney general, is a straight up criminal. He got impeached. He was paying people off to cover up an affair he was having. He's been under indictment for financial crimes for a decade. He's a bad guy. And Abbott, they're all the lieutenant governor there. They're all bad guys. Texas, I'll wrap it up quick so Steve can talk. But Texas is a fairly purple state, but the crappy Republican leadership is able to suppress the vote.
Yep, Steve, glad you're able to join. What's your
I'm just I'm sorry I'm late, guys. I got a city council meeting in a few minutes. Not much. Just thinking about I'm gonna want to get back on Sasha start next week about the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia made a major attack today on Ukraine, so war is continuing. Presidential race, Trump probably doesn't want to debate at this point, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And I think people are just kind of, looking to see what's going to happen. I think things are tightening up. I spoke to Mayor Leo Williams from Durham. He's in Puerto Rico today addressing the mayors and Latin American mayors, and he's traveling as a surrogate all over the country. And this thing's going to be, I think all eyes are on the presidency of the United States. So, I think it's an interesting time in politics, and get out your popcorn. It's gonna get turbulent, and I think everybody's ready to get this country back on steady footing.
What's your take on the Robertson-Stein race? I know Stein's well ahead, and I know he's an associate of yours and everything along those lines. But I did see earlier today a YouTube post where apparently Robertson is taking the issue with the attacks on his daycare or his family's daycare, and he's also saying that he wants to get back on education and economics and some of those other kinds of things, and he's thinking that he wants to do more of a person-to-person kind of conversation so that he can actually get in the faces of the people and everything, because right now he is significantly behind. He tried to downplay that on the report that I saw and everything, but what is your take on what's going on in that situation?
Well, I think my take on it is campaign has really been run really poorly. I mean, I think a lot of statements made in politics when you're on the mic, you're on the record, and lots of things that he made with, very conservative statements about, some of the ones I talked about in the news on PBS last week. And he said he rolled out a public safety plan, but this is the man that said, I need an AR-15 if the government gets out of line. This is a man who said every now and then it's a good at killing. This is a man who said, it's not about it's not about a woman's right to choose. It's about a woman keeping her skirt down. I think these things have really made people, even moderate Republicans and independents, very concerned about any governor to be a chief executive of the 8th largest state in the union, which is still an economic development position. We lost billions of dollars with HB2. So now I think it's like, well, I'm rolling out a 10-point economic plan. I'm rolling out a public safety plan. I think he's seeing the numbers, and it's like, fourth and long at this point. I wouldn't take anything for granted. I think his greatest chances were Biden being the nominee, probably riding in on the coattails. But now with Vice President Harris, I will say this. I do think that North Carolina is at play. I think Governor Cooper, in my political theory, didn't run because he knew that he's seeing some data we're not seeing. But I think 12,000 volunteers of Harris's campaign, 9,500 activated. You've got extreme candidates like Robinson, Dan Bishop, Michelle Morrow on the bottom of the ballot. I think that means that those, even Republicans or Democrats that vote for Stein or independents, they may keep voting, and you may end up having more votes. So Cooper smells 2008 again. Look, this guy's never lost an election. He's a Morehead Kane scholar, #1 graduate from law school at Carolina. If I were a betting man, other than I would bet on Roy Cooper's prediction, and he smells 2008. I do too, and they win North Carolina, game over. That's why they're coming here. Tim Walz is coming here on Thursday for a fundraiser. Kamala's been here 14 times, and I think there's a reason for that.
Hey, Steve, along those same lines, I started off the show, I did see your hand, Rick, but I started off the show before everybody joined me with a quote from a person that I think of as being a relatively moderate Republican governor, that being Jim Martin, because Jim Martin earlier today published the reasons that he can't support either Kamala or Trump, and he feels that it's time, kind of like David Walker, for a third-party candidacy, and he was saying that he was going to be working towards that. Now, whether he's going to be working with David K. Walker, whether he's going to be working with somebody else, that he didn't make clear, but he did make it seem like he was very much frustrated by both sides of the aisle and everything, and he wrote that in the Charlotte Observer earlier today and everything. But that's what I was wondering.
Well, I think that at the end of the day, I'll leave with this. I know Rick wants to speak, and I'm going to go get at my desk, and I'll try to be on there next week for the whole hour. But the bottom line is that, Mark, look, I think many people feel like that. I'm hearing that on both sides of the aisle. But the bottom line is this is what our choice is. And, this is an open job. We've got to fill the job. There's no choice. This country needs a president. And I think the question becomes who can do it. Vice President Harris did, when she accepted the nomination, say that she wanted to be a president of all the people, Republican, Democrat, Independent. Now the proof is, what are the details behind her policies? How is she going to pay for things? How is she going to bring pricing down? What is the economic plan? I think that's going to be the specifics as the honeymoon is over. She's got to start meeting with the media. She's got to start talking specifics. And but I respect Governor Martin. He was a good governor, and I think he was more of a moderate. But I think at the end of the day, you got to make a decision. But it's a good news that a guy like him doesn't want to support Trump. But the problem is, if they end up not voting, then that's as much of a problem. So maybe good news for Mark Robinson that these guys just don't even vote. I think there's going to be down ballot effect. I do believe, but I think these Republicans probably are going to vote for Stein. I think so. We'll see what happens.
Here's a bit of it was news to me until it popped up on Twitter. Harris and Walz are sitting down with CNN's Dana Bash 2 days from now to do their first big interview. So
we'll see what happens.
And that's a smart move. 2-on-1 means it cuts the chance of either of them saying something dumb in half.
Right. Well, let's get together soon. I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully in the morning. Otherwise, have a good night. That's my take. Hopefully I gave you enough. I think there's a lot going on in the world. The main thing is Russia, Ukraine, presidential race. Trying to think if there's anything else I've missed. Anything else going on in the world? Israel, Gaza. Yeah. That's the, kind of where does Harris stand on that? She's kind of, it's like a seesaw. She's up and down on that, but damn if you do, damn if you don't. So we'll continue these discussions next week. Always a pleasure to be on Pod of Roku TV. Hopefully I'll get to open next week and stay there for the hour, just managing different things out here in my media and public role hat. So thank you.
Appreciate you. Hopefully we'll have Leonardo come on soon, because I definitely hope he'll come on and talk about what he's doing, both when he spoke as well as the government. I'm
sending my newsletter out tomorrow, and I'm still haven't finished it, so I've got to add his speech in there with the picture of his speech and make my last minute changes. So thank you. Have a good day. Yeah. Be safe, guys.
Here's another bit of news. Jack Smith has returned a new set of indictments against Trump because the old set of indictments kind of got frozen after the Supreme Court said that presidents have a certain amount of immunity. So he's got a new set of indictments that avoid any of the problems, I guess, set up by the Supreme Court giving him immunity. This just happened in the last, 2 hours? And, we haven't seen him in action as a litigator. Everything's been behind the scenes. Eventually, he'll probably end up in a courtroom arguing with Trump's lawyers. We haven't seen that yet, but based on his record, he's a very competent guy.
Hey, just really quickly, and I just thought of this question and everything, because when I think of California, there are certain demographics that I think of. Definitely there's a decent European American and African American population there, and a fairly sizable migrant population, Latin population, and a fairly sizable Asian population. I know you've got friends in both of those circles. One of the guys that works with you on Naked at Night is of Hispanic descent, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on what you're hearing from your friends that are from those two big demographics, because I know California is a very big state.
All right, so my friend JD, who's the director of our show Naked at Night, he's Latino. He's from McAllen, Texas, which is one of the most hot button border cities. Mm-hmm. When Fox News wants to cover the border, they go to McAllen, and he's right in the middle. He's half of his friends are Trumpy, maybe more than half, but he lives in LA. So, he's got a lot of lib friends such as myself. And, he's constantly playing devil's advocate with me and then with his people on the other side. And I think he feels the same way that I feel, which is 10 years ago, we were happy to be kind of politically oblivious. We could check the news once a week. I had to check it a little more because I had a job where I'd have to write topical jokes, but we were happy to be underinformed. And now since Trump, you got to I'm on Twitter, 100 times a day, seeing what's a crack-a-whacking. It's too much. And it's a lot. I've said that, I'm a skinny dude now. I'm 140.
Right.
At the beginning of the Trump era, I was over 155, and I lost the weight because all the craziness just gave me diarrhea.
I understand that and everything as we get ready to wrap up this show and everything. What's your take? Because, like I said, I know that there is a large population there. There's a large population even here where I'm at in North Carolina. But how big of an influence do you think the Asian population is going to be into this election? And do you feel, because I've heard a lot of people feel that, and I know that it's not a homogeneous group. They are split just like the Latin American population is. There's some that are very conservative, some that are very liberal, and everything along those lines.
I mean, maybe more of an influence here. I just looked up the demographics. 15% of Californians are Asian American.
Wow.
And I might get myself in trouble here, but I think when I see Asians, I think of the future. Mm-hmm. Asians are our most science fiction-y demographic. They're really smart. They as a group, stereotypically, they just seem cutting edge, which I know that's ridiculous, but I feel like, this is, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if you wanted to show in a TV show that somebody's modern and hip, you give them an Asian girlfriend. I just think Asians, I don't know, they just seem Asians are the Jews of now. 50, 60, 80 years ago, Jews were the stereotypical hardworking, smart professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants. Asians have bumped us aside as that group, the high achieving, super smart, I don't know.
No, I can agree with you on that and everything, because I think that if you look at and this is the younger folks, but if you look at the last several champions of the spelling bees, it is usually somebody that is of Asian descent that is winning those national spelling bees that take place. There have been some exceptions, but for a lot of part, they are Japanese, Chinese, or other Asian descents from what I can recall.
Plus, they're ninjas.
Right.
And ninjas are cool. Plus anime. Plus manga, plus they've got a big spot in our entertainment center.
Yep, and there was a major anime conference that I learned about, ironically, through a show here on this network, because they were on Irene's timeshare show. But one of the people that had been victimized by timeshares, he and his wife run an anime conference, Isaka Anime, in Salt Lake City, Utah. So they had it in February of last year, and they're going to be having it in March of this year, and he's trying to recover the money he lost off of the timeshare, but he's also trying to get his event organized as well. So folks can look up.
So here, I've got an Asian story.
Okay.
In about 1999, I was a producer and creator on a show for VH1, a music quiz show, and the VH1 was so cheap, and that they gave us one computer for the whole production.
Wow.
So crazy. And we hired a writer's assistant named Ying Lu. Ying Lu, she needed a computer to keep track of the questions where they were in production. Had they been fact checked? Were they slotted into a show? Had they been asked? Did a show happen and they didn't get asked? Can they be reused? And she needed a computer for that, obviously.
Right.
Ying Lu figured out how to build a question tracking system out of rings, out of metal rings that you use in a ring binder. She built this abacus deal out of rings and cards with holes punched in them. She built a primitive computer out of index cards and metal rings. It was so crazy.
It sounds crazy. As we go out the door and everything, I was actually just thinking that one of our claims to fame here in North Carolina is a guy that was a doctor, but he was a medical student and an actual doctor. But he is also the star of hangover. So I know he lives out there in your neck of the woods, but he
Yeah.
graduated from Duke University and was actually a successful stand-up comedian. I think he still does stand-up comedy.
Yeah. He comes on. I listen to stand-up radio. He comes on every once in a while. He's freaking great, and he's fantastically Asian. He's a doctor. His wife's a doctor, and he's a movie star.
Yes, no doubt.
And he's not afraid to show his wiener, which he's awesome. Asians are awesome.
Ken is awesome. And on that note, we're getting ready to get on out of here. We've had another interesting conversation about politics, and we'll be back on Thursday with more conversation about this as well, and also World Edition and some of the other programming tomorrow. But right now, it's time to get on out of here.
All right, bye.